Good afternoon, folks. I'm going to go ahead and do a little demo of ArcGIS in preparation for Tuesday's exam. And I just wanted to go through and review some of the basics of the software, some things you're going to want to look for in terms of the exam coming up. You'll be sure to check on the study guide that's been posted, because there's both a conceptual part that's based more on the lectures and the discussions, as well as some of the quizzes that you guys have been taking. But you will also have a practical in ArcGIS, so I wanted to spend some time with that. You'll recall that you have two different applications, ArcCatalog and ArcMap. We're spending most of our time in ArcMap, but we do want to be familiar with ArcCatalog, which is designed to be able to allow you to browse and manage your spatial data. And while you do have catalog within the ArcMap application, you should know that ArcCatalog, which is a separate application, is denoted by the little filing cabinet with the globe inside of it. If you switch back over and look at catalog, it kind of looks a little bit similar, but you will not see that icon in the upper left hand part of your screen when you're in ArcCatalog. And that's going to give you some enhanced capabilities, which I will speak to. So what we have here is a catalog tree, and you always want to be cognizant of your folder connections when you're in ArcCatalog, in ArcGIS in general. And we're not doing much with toolboxes and all this stuff at the bottom, but you do want to be cognizant of what is in your catalog tree. If your catalog tree gets closed down, you can always bring it back up from the Windows drop-down menu, and in your folder connections, you'll see what you're connected to at any given point in time. You can disconnect folders from this point, and you can also connect folders. And just remember my caution about having you burrow too deep into your folder structure. For the most part, you'll want to just be sort of connecting at the Z drive level. I have some local data that I'm going to be working from here, and this is in the miscellaneous GIS data types. I provided this in the student folder on the Z drive for you to review. And if you're in early during the 11 to 1 o'clock tutor time, open office hour, open lab time, you can browse through some of this data on your own. And notice how I'm working from the catalog tree here. I like to click on the folder itself, which then in the contents window tells me what it is that I'm working from. You should start to be familiarized with the icons. You can see that coverage, the oldest of the data sets, is indicated by this grouping of different symbols. Of course, geodatabases, you see 3 file geodatabases. You see some folders, which of course contain additional data that we can look at. You'll notice that there are, going on down the list here, we have a map document. That is our ArcMap document. We'll be visiting that in a moment. We've got a raster data set as indicated by this grid of cells, and we have local streets. It's also helpful to remember that we have a preview tab, and so within the preview tab, now I'm actually at the folder level at the moment, so I would really want to actually click on an individual feature. So at the database, doesn't show me a whole lot, but if I click on an actual spatial layer, and in this case, you know, we could look at what city limits is by going to the database itself and looking at its contents. And here we see, of course, this is a file geodatabase feature class. Notice the use of the file geodatabase feature data set, which is the sewer. Again, notice the groupings. They also include a standalone table. And we, of course, can look inside of the feature data set to actually look at our spatial data. If I was interested in exploring the wastewater mains, I could choose on the, click on the file and then choose the preview tab. at this point I actually have the ability to zoom in, and I can also look not only at the spatial geography but also at the tabular data. We can scroll across. We also have capabilities working from our tables that are similar to what we have when we're working in ArcMap. For example, if you right-click your mouse over a given field, you can get statistics, you can sort. This is very similar to what you would see if you were operating in ArcMap. And then, of course, we have the description tab, which is where you would access your metadata. And your metadata will include various pieces of information. And so we see things like the spatial extent of our data and our spatial reference, our all-important spatial reference. And so you'll expect to be able to answer a question such as identify the projection of a particular file, which you can access through the description tab. But remember that you also have the ability to access your properties related to any data set. And here we can see again our spatial referencing information here shown under the XY coordinate system. We can also look at the fields themselves and how those fields were defined. And this will be familiar to you, if not from the properties, from our recent activities in adding and delineating new feature classes and the fields that will comprise a new feature class that we might create in a geodatabase for editing purposes. All right, so let's go ahead and jump over to ArcMap, and I actually have an existing map document that I'm working from here. If you were to start a new map document, or if you were just to initiate ArcMap from the start menu, you would basically start with a blank slate. And you just want to be conscious of this map document as this file that allows us to have many different layers combined together, colored and symbolized in unique ways, grouped together, and of course you spend quite a bit of time working in this interface. So what we see here is a series of data layers, and these data layers are going to be reside in this case within a single data frame called city data. And you can see the city limits boundary at the top here. You can see that I have my tools toolbar, which you want to be familiar with. Of course, the zoom tools that are available to you, but also be aware of the ability to identify features. So for example, if I were to ask you, what is the name of the school that's found within the small polygon within the city limits boundary, you could simply take the identify tool and click on that particular feature. In this case, it actually chose the city limits layer, so I could force it to look at schools in particular, and now if I click on it, it should get this particular school. Sometimes you have to drag a boundary around it. There we go. You can see how the point flashes, and here it tells me the name of the school, address, various other information that we might be interested in finding. Now, remember that when you're working with your data, one of the first things that you want to do is not only look at the spatial data, in this case the extent of schools that are found within the area, but we also want to be able to look at the attributes. And to access the attributes, we will right-click on a feature, and this gives us the context menu, and this is where we have lots of really important features. We could come in and label features, for example. I'm going to hold off on labeling features for a moment. We can access layer properties, which you will all need to be able to do, and also to access the attribute table. And I would like to have you focus in particular here on opening the attribute table and looking at the properties. Because the attribute table is so central to what GIS is about, and it's going to allow us to see the descriptive information for all of the features that are found. In this case, there are 30 schools. So if you were asked the question, how many records are there, or how many features are there on a particular layer, this is a far more efficient way of doing it than counting the features. In this case, there are only 30 schools, but if there was 500 schools, obviously a kind of laborious task. And in this case, you can see that the schools themselves are labeled from 1 to 30 in the object ID field, which is the internal field by which a feature class tracks its information. We can see the names here. In this case, we are sorted by alphabetical order. If I wanted to invert the sorting of this, I would simply right-click over the field and I could sort descending. For example, I've got phone numbers and other sorts of information in the attribute table. For the most part, there's not a whole lot that I've had you doing in the attribute table, but do know that you have the ability within an attribute table to, well, let's take land use as an example. I'm going to open up the attribute table, and let's see, I've got area here, so I might be interested in knowing what the average area is for each of the land use types. So it tells me that there's 881 count, same as the number of records. And the smallest is just 18, and the largest is 8,640,283. The total area and the average, or the mean. So that's just a simple statistical way to do it. Of course, we could also sort these. We could find out what the largest polygon is. You'll notice that there are no units associated with this area value. That would actually be information that's stored in the properties for the layer. So let's go ahead and look at the properties of this particular layer. So again, I've right-clicked on my mouse. I have brought up my properties layer, and now I'm going to take you through the layer properties. Note that this program I'm using gives me a 15-minute limit, so I'm about to run out of time here, so I'm going to make a second video, so be forewarned that this may cut off. But if I go to the General tab, I can change the name that's visible on the map, and if I look under the Source tab, let's go back to that again. Here's the General tab. Now I made a little bit of a liar out of myself, because the actual units in this case are going to be described under the city data, but I can actually find that information here. If I look at the source and scroll down, I can see that the linear unit is the meter. Okay, so the area in this case would be square meters that were stored in that default area field. There's a lot of things here. You don't need to be familiar with all of these. You should be familiar with the Labels tab, specifically in relation to identifying what field you're going to label something on. So for example, if I was interested in labeling on the general plan name, I could simply click it here. I just change this, and that would then be shown if I were to apply this. Let's see if I can do that for you. Not a very sensible way to label something, but more importantly here is the Symbology tab. And you need to know how to map things by categories. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to use the land use code. I'll simply add all values to this, and that's going to allow me to symbolize on that particular field. You also will want to be able to do quantities. I'm going to go ahead and label my schools. I'll make sure that that's the names.